Our next question comes from Chuck out of Arden, North Carolina, and he writes, I would like to request the topic again of women being deacons. Could you please further clarify this topic for me? Thank you.
You know, someone stopped me on Sunday evening before I went in to meet the pastor and tell me about this woman. Well, she's a deacon in this church, and we don't think she is a preacher, and, is that okay? And I was addressing it. I mean, I was already 2 minutes late for the meeting, and there was 20 people waiting for me in the room. But the bigger point was it has nothing to do with her being a preacher. The bigger issue is that she's a deacon. Should women be deacons? Absolutely, definitively, no. It has nothing to do with equality. But you see, people don't want to say that today because that just sounds like, so, misogynistic and, you don't want to offend women. Well, of course, you don't want to offend anybody unless you're offending them with truth. And so you have to preach the truth, and it doesn't matter what the culture may think. And so when he says deacons likewise must be men of dignity, not double-tongued or addicted to much wine or fond of sordid gain, but holding to the mystery of the faith with a clear conscience. These men must first be tested. That's what we're doing right now. We have some men that we felt like they were deacon qualified. They answered an in-depth questionnaire just to make sure we had misread it. And 6 of them are right now being tested for the next 6 months before they're ordained, just to make sure that they're a good fit for their own life and their season of life and for our church family. Then he says, after they're tested, let them serve as deacons if they're beyond reproach. And then the next verse says, and this is one of the verses people use to get women deacons, women must likewise be dignified, not malicious gossips. Now, the word women there is the word gunikos. It means women, a woman in deference to a man, or a wife. And so when he says wives must be submissive to their husbands in Ephesians 5, he uses this word gunikos. And so some translations like the NIV and the King James and other English Bibles interpret the word and they say the wives of deacons. And I think that is legitimate. I think that's what's in view. Why would he mention the wives of deacons? By virtue of the nature of what a deacon does. And a deacon is engaged in ministering to families. And many times the deacon's wife is involved with him because it's not appropriate, say, for a deacon man to go to some single woman's house to meet some need alone. And so in light of that, women or the wives of deacons must be dignified, not malicious gossips. Some men are qualified to be deacons, but their wives disqualify them from the office because they're gossips and they're going to become privy to information. Maybe they're trying to help some couple and they come over to their home and they discover some problems. And if they're gossips, you got a real problem. And so then he immediately resumes, deacons must be the husbands of only one wife, which is, again, a good reason to understand that he's not dealing with deaconesses as a separate office because he's continuing on with the same list of qualifications for men. If you can tell me how a woman can be the husband of only one wife, I can tell you how she can be a deacon, but she can't be. Now, some would appeal to a verse like Romans 16, where you have Phoebe, and they say, here it is, right here, and it's really a stupid argument. It's not even intelligent, and I'm not trying to make fun, but this is an important issue. I commend you to our sister Phoebe, who is a servant of the church, which is in Cenchrea. And if you have the New American Standard, it puts a little footnote before the word servant, and it says deaconess, who is a deaconess. Now, question, is he referring to Phoebe as someone who serves in the office of deacon, or is he referring to Phoebe who's simply a female servant? I would say the latter. Listen, the word deacon can have a technical and non-technical use, just like the word apostle. There's a group of men called apostles. There are none today because to have been an apostle, you had to have seen the risen Christ, been personally selected by him. If those two things were true, 2 Corinthians 12:12 says you'll do the signs, wonders, and miracles that only an apostle can do. And yet Epaphroditus is called an apostolos. He's a sent one. It doesn't mean that he is in the office of apostle. And the word deacon can be used of someone in the office or someone who's just a servant. Jesus said, he that would be great among you, let him be the deacon of all. It's the same word. And that's what's being done here with Phoebe. It's the feminine use of the word deacon. A deaconess, she's a servant. That's why we're commending her. And that's why the NAS and most English Bibles render it servant, because they recognize this is not the office of deacon that is in view here. He's dealing with a woman who is esteemed as a servant in the church. And the corker for it all is Acts chapter 6. When you come to the office of elder, it's not a new office. It's found in the Old Testament. But the office of deacon is a New Testament office. So if it's a New Testament office, then you'd expect that it would be highlighted somewhere in terms of its establishment, and it is in Acts chapter 6. There's a controversy in terms of needs being met in the local assembly, again, as we mentioned earlier in the broadcast, because no one wants to leave Jerusalem. We're seeing a fulfillment of prophecy that God had spoken of for millennia, and so they need some men to wait on tables. It's not the apostles or above it, but they have other priorities. Select from among yourself 7 men who are filled with the Holy Spirit and filled with wisdom. This is the office of deacon being established. And he uses the word, not 7 people, anthropoi, but he uses the word arnir that refers physically to a man. And so the office of deacon is for a man. It's not for a woman. But a lot of churches, they make women in this because, we can't make her a preacher, but we can at least make her a deacon. And look, there's other things women can do that are absolutely essential for them to do. And the church is greatly harmed when they don't do those things. And the church is greatly harmed when we mix up roles between men and women. And sadly, churches across America are doing that.
Dr. Carl Broggi answers your questions about the Bible and living the Christian life Tuesday mornings at 11 on The Light, 88.7 FM, and online around the world at wagp.net.